people on the call this evening. Got some great content lined up for you. I am Kate Van Wyk. I'm the growth gardener here at LOTUSWEI, and I will be moderating this evening's call with flower alchemist Katie Hess. I will pass it off to her in just one moment here. But first of all, I want to make sure that everybody has something nice and comforting to drink, something nourishing, a glass of water or tea. And then also make sure, if you don't already have one, grab a pen and a piece of paper. You are definitely going to want to take notes. There's some great content this evening. And Katie will also be having doing a short exercise later in the call as well that you're going to want to make sure that you have something to write with. So we also are not going to have time this evening for a Q&A session, but if at any time you come up with questions, there is a chat box if you're in the Zoom app on your computer. If you hover down below and hit chat, you can type a question in there. Best way to do it, especially there's so many of you who are calling in, you can email us. It is flowerevolution@lotuswei.com. That's spelled flower, Flower, evolution, EVOLUTION @lotuswei, LOTUSWEI.com. And we will make sure we get all those questions answered and compiled into a follow-up email we will be sending out with you. So without further ado, I will be passing it off to Katie Hess, founder of LOTUSWEI and Flower Alchemist.
Hi there. Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to be with us. As Kate said, I am a flower alchemist. I am the author of a book called Flowerevolution, and I'm a woman who wants to make a big positive impact in the world. And this is how I've been introducing myself at the Flower Lounge events. We just got back, the team and I, from a month road trip on the road, and we went to 7 different cities doing these events called flower lounges. So some of you in the call may have met us there, may have been able to join us. If not, it was an amazing experience, and there seems to be sort of a theme that I was experiencing both at the flower lounge and some of the things that we're going to go over tonight. And that has a lot to do with being. And whether we're talking about flowers or like this evening, the focus really isn't on flowers. It's more on methods and mind training and what to do. And, shit hits the fan in our lives. and really it's all about like how we are incredibly powerful as human beings, and how in modern life we are oftentimes, on the go so much and really in the doing mode. We've got this like never-ending to-do list, and actually how powerful it is to give ourselves the luxury of time to just be. And you can think of that in terms of like self-care time, to just take a break and sit under a tree. You can also think of that in terms of like allowing ourselves to be fully who we are, and allowing ourselves to feel what it feels like to be who we fully are through all of the different amazing and crazy and challenging experiences that we have in our lives. So my hope is to cover some ideas around how to elicit our truest self. And why we would want to do that is the idea that by doing that, by just being who we are at our truest core, being fully ourselves, that we are simultaneously positively impacting the world. I always like to mention this study because I just find it so mind-blowing and inspiring. This study out of Europe where they found that if your friend's friend becomes wildly happy, it has more of a beneficial effect on you than if someone put $5,000 in your pocket. And the converse is true, meaning that if any shift in our mood and how we are in the moment is directly impacting not only the people around us in our vicinity, but people that we're somehow connected to that we don't even know. And that's really sort of like the core why behind all of this information tonight, and the whole idea of jumping off the cliff and catching ourselves. Before we get into all the rich content, if you haven't met me before, just to give you a little quick, update on my background. I've been working with flower elixirs for the last 18 years. And what really grabbed me initially when I first started learning about them was that my teacher had said, if 3% of the world's population were using flower elixirs regularly, it would have enough of a powerful positive ripple effect, sort of like a tipping point, that it would radically change the outcome of the future. And that to me was really exciting, because sometimes it's overwhelming when you wanna change the world and you think about all of the crazy things that are going on. But 3% seemed sort of doable to me. So if you haven't heard of flower elixirs before, it's the collection of the life force of the flower. So it's very different from essential oils. It doesn't have a scent. And in fact, studies are showing today that bees are not even attracted to flowers by color or scent. They're actually attracted by this very subtle form of electricity, and that they're actually communicating with the bees different forms of information through this subtle electricity. And so that's actually what we're talking about with flower elixirs, is gathering this life force or chi or very subtle electricity from flowers, because every flower has a really specific healing quality. But tonight, for a change, is actually not going to be about flowers. It's more about mind training. So initially, when I first started working with flowers, the first decade or so was spent working with people one-on-one. And at that time, when I was still doing consultations, I would make people, flower elixirs to take home, and then we'd meet once a month. And what's really interesting about using flower elixirs regularly is that they start to bring certain things to the surface that you hadn't seen before. And so very quickly in my practice, mind training methods became very important, not only as a practice for myself, but to share with clients, because the flower elixirs can take you so far, and that at a certain point, it relies on your awareness and your ability to sort of work with whatever is arising. And so tonight is all about some really simple methods, or you could even call them approaches, of how to work with ourselves when our lives get crazy or difficult or challenging, and what we do in those moments. Because I find it so fascinating that this is something that all of us face, right? All of us have moments in our lives that are intensely painful or challenging, but there isn't ever a class in school that prepared us for what to do with those intense emotions. So, just as sort of an intro to the material that we'll cover tonight, I think there's three really main benefits to practicing these methods that I've found personally. And I don't like to share things that I haven't at depth practiced myself. So this isn't something that I got out of a book, although it may be out there in some book, in some shape or form. But it's just methods that I've personally put into practice and found to be really useful and helpful. And out of my personal experience, the benefits to using some of these methods are that it increases our intimacy. And that can be intimacy in all different types of relationships, as we're more able to open up about what's happening for us on the inside. It also increases and enhances our creativity. One really simple example from my personal life has been that writing has been a hugely transformative practice for me only in the last year or so. I had a really difficult sort of friendship loss at the beginning of the year, and I just sort of didn't really know where to put all those emotions. And so I started writing poetry, or words, and it was really amazing to see how something that started out as a sort of painful experience transformed into something really joyful and beautiful, because the words have sort of bled over into the business and sharing poetry and in events and emails and such. And then beyond intimacy and creativity, it also definitely enhances our level of compassion. And it's all about allowing ourselves to soften and let any kind of experiences that we have shift us versus blocking them or getting hard or bitter. Um, and all of these things, the intimacy, the creativity, the compassion, they're things that can be felt in our impact when we talk, or when people are in our presence. People feel it. People feel when you're telling the truth. People feel you when you're soft. People feel your heart when you're being vulnerable. When your heart has been broken so that more light is coming in, people can feel that, and it's really, really inspiring. And you give other people permission to do the same. So before we get into all of the content, I thought it might be nice for us to just take a couple minutes to sit quietly and rest our bodies and set an intention for why we're all here. I know how rare it is to take time for ourselves. So if you want to, close out the windows on your computer, if you're at your computer, push back from your desk, and really just give yourself some time to relax and be. And we're going to just start out by doing some physical movement, just rolling your head around in a circle, working out any tension in the back of your neck. Really simple, gentle movements. And then you're going to roll your head in the other direction. And then take a nice deep breath. And when you let it out like a sigh. And then you're going to roll your shoulders back. And just sort of starting to unravel tension in your shoulders, where you carry things. Roll your shoulders forwards. And then moving your shoulders just straight up to see if you can touch your ears. And then gently relaxing them back down. Noticing if there's any tension in the back of your neck. If there is, you can see what it feels like to tip your chin closer to your chest. And then you're going to imagine that you were taking your heart center and sort of facing it to the ceiling, and kind of sticking out your chest, opening up your chest cavity and opening up your heart toward the sky. And then you can relax. If you're in a seated position, you can move your whole upper body around in a circle, which sort of rolls your hips around in a circle. If you're lying down, you can modify this movement by just moving your hips around in circles. You can go the other direction. And then coming to a nice either sitting or lying down position, whatever is comfortable for you. We're just going to do a quick scan of our body. Sometimes it helps to close your eyes. Just noticing what the top of your head feels like, your ears, all the muscles in your face, the muscles in your throat. Relaxing the back of your neck, tipping your chin slightly towards your chest. Noticing any tension in your shoulders. Try just making the intention that it's going to roll off down your arms and wrists and fingers and fingertips. Relaxing your chest and your belly and all the parts of your back, your spine. Take a deep breath and fill your whole upper body with nice, spacious air. Relaxing your hips, your thighs, down to your knees, calves, shins, ankles, tops of your feet, bottoms of your feet, and all the way down to your toes. Just taking the moment to check in with your body. How does your body feel? It might feel tired, it might feel energized, it might feel overworked, it might feel sore, in pain, or tight, invigorated, nervous, relaxed. Whatever it is, just noticing it. The body's always changing. Noticing your breathing. If it's fast or slow, if it's in your chest or in your belly. Just noticing it. You don't have to change it. There's no right or wrong. You're doing great as you are. See if you can feel your heart beating, the blood pumping in your veins. If you can get a sense of your heart beating, just noting that that's where your life is sustained, is from that heart. And that's where all the softness and tenderness is as well. Even if you don't feel soft and tender, just knowing that that's where it resides is in your heart. And we can use that for later. And we'll just make the intention that everything we do and say and create and experience together is for the highest benefit. That it may lead all of us into more and more happiness, and happiness of all beings everywhere. If you have a personal challenge or a specific intention that you want to set, you can do that mentally now in your mind. If there's some insight you're looking for, or some resolution or ease to some challenging situation, we can make an intention. Why not? And then when you're ready, you can gently open your eyes. If you need to stretch, you can stretch. If you need to wiggle, you can wiggle. And we're going to get into the nitty-gritty here of jumping off the cliff and catching yourself. So there was a story that I was telling at some of the Flower Lounge events about my dog whose name is Joy, and she's 16 years old. And I won't tell you the whole story, but part of the story was how for the last year or so she's been going in and out of this sort of like dying process. Like she's dying, we think she's dying, we think she's transitioning, and then she comes back, and then she has a stroke, and then we think she's dying, and then she comes back. And all of the different things that I was learning from this experience of possibly losing my best friend dog, and then she's back. And one of the interesting things that I learned was that in the last, a couple of weeks before the last Flower Lounge tour, she had her worst series of strokes, and she lost her ability to walk, and she went fully blind. And then she bounced back out of it again. And as we were walking her around the house, she went through this a couple of weeks where she just walked constantly through the house to rewire her brain and remap the space. And there was a time period where we had her on this short leash because she was still a little bit Bambi, like her legs would fall out from underneath her. And so I'd walk her around for hours around the house with this leash. And then we'd walk outside, and there are some areas outside where we have like a sort of not a cliff, but it's, the cement really cuts off. And if she were to go over the edge, it wouldn't be a good story. She'd face plant in the cement, and it was dangerous. So as I was, walking her around with the leash, every time she got really close to the edge, I'd sort of guide her back with the leash. And it felt to me like she just really wanted to go over the edge. It ended up when we took the leash off and she had full freedom and range of movement, she knew right where the edge was, and she was totally perfectly fine. And so what I learned, one of the things I learned from that experience was that I was being a little bit overprotective, and that just allowing her to find the edges was okay, and that she knew where the edge was and she wasn't going to hurt herself. And that experience sort of led me to reflect and think, I wonder how often I do that with myself. Like, do we become overprotective of ourselves and not allow ourselves to just sort of jump off the cliff and take a risk? And if we did, what would happen? And would it really be that bad? And, is it actually what would actually happen that's the worst thing? Or is it the anticipation and the fear and the overprotectiveness that's actually holding us back in some way? And so when I think about um, difficult and challenging situations that we have in our lives, the first thing that sort of jumps out to me is the fact that there is tremendous complexity in our lives, and that each one of us as human beings can handle a lot. And I think that this is really fascinating, that in the same couple of weeks that we may be losing a loved one, maybe we're making an extra $1 million or winning the lottery. There's like this total complexity of emotions that can be experienced at the same time, or variety of painful or challenging at the same time, of really joyful and beautiful experiences that can occur in one short period of time. I had a conversation with a really close friend of mine whose best friend just died, and she was talking to me about, obviously the tremendous grief that she was experiencing, but then she talked about freedom, because she had spent, the whole last few weeks with her best friend before she transitioned. And I said, tell me about the freedom piece. Like, what do you mean about the freedom? And she told me this really beautiful story about how, by being able to be really present with her friend as she was transitioning, it almost like melted away some of the old patterning and protective layers that she herself had and made her feel softer and more vulnerable and open-hearted. And she said that, even though she no longer, her best friend isn't in, human physical form now, she, carries with her this tremendous freedom of having melted away all of these old patterns and layers that she had. And she's like literally feeling like not a new person, but more herself. And so that just led me to also think about, how often do we protect ourselves from feeling things, and how comfortable can we let ourselves get with discomfort? And like in the case with my dog Joy, once we took her off the leash and she found the edge, there was no falling. There was nothing that, nothing that scary that happened. There's a Chogyam Trungpa quote that is my absolute favorite, and it goes something like, the bad news is that we're all falling and there's nothing to hold on to and there's no parachute. And the good news is there's no ground. So the more that we can, let ourselves get comfortable with that sort of jumping off the cliff feeling. And I've experienced it myself in certain situations where you're anticipating that something is going to happen. Maybe you're anticipating loss, loss of a friend, loss of a pet, loss of something really meaningful and profoundly important to you. And you almost get this like nervousness or this sort of like physical body, visceral panic, like I'm going to jump off a cliff. And, why would we want to jump off the cliff? But it's almost like the anticipation of the pain before it even happens. That's worse than the actual jumping. And so some of these things are kind of, difficult to talk about because you can't really find good ways to put them into words. But for this evening, I'm going to talk about 3 ways that we can jump off the cliff and 3 ways that we can catch ourselves as we jump. So the first way to allow ourselves to get more comfortable with discomfort and to be able to find the clarity that's on the other side of that coin is to just allow ourselves to totally fall apart, to feel fully, to let ourselves be fully in whatever process we're going through, not have to figure it out, not have to intellectualize it, but just allow ourselves to fully feel. I think, in society, it's very common that we, have to keep it together and, stay in control. And the reality is that life is pretty messy. And so allowing ourselves first and foremost to be able to just fall apart with ourselves and just be a witness to ourselves is a huge practice, a beneficial practice. And it's one of the ways that we can just let ourselves jump off the cliff and allow an experience to transform us from the inside out. So how do we do that? I mean, one of the ways that I've found to be really helpful is to create a container within ourselves that allows all parts of ourselves to be present, even and especially the contradictory parts. So it would be like having a dinner party with all of the characters inside of you that are involved in a particular experience and flooding your system with enough love to sort of encompass all of those parts. So if you were having a dinner party with all of the characters inside of you, you might have the rebel, you might have the one who's embarrassed or shameful, you might have the kid who never got invited to anything, or the one who said something you regret, or the one that you locked in the basement. But having all of these characters be able to be present, and the like positive and the wonderful and the joyful and all of the good qualities, or that you would label as good qualities. We all have those parts of ourselves that we really like and we really identify with, and then we have those parts that we maybe don't really want to always see, or we at least don't want to let them take control of us or take the reins. So instead of feeling aversion or locking away parts of ourselves or blaming or attacking or ignoring or suppression, it's just like something as simple and sort of humorous and curious as what would it be like to have a dinner party with all of the characters that are inside of you, and letting all of them have a voice, letting all of them have an experience, not suppressing any one of them, being open to each and every one of their stories. And I find this to be a really nice way to allow ourselves to fall apart if we have a difficult experience in terms of feeling fully and being really in touch with what each of those parts of ourselves is feeling and wanting at the time. And I'll just, offer like a little caveat. If it's something in life where we're having this sort of mild discomfort, it's a lot easier to sit, to just sit with an experience. Something's really uncomfortable, we feel really strong, intense emotions, and we can just like sit quietly and feel it and be in it. That's a lot easier than something like really strong grief, panic, anxiety, or loss. And sometimes we need other expressions of moving through it. Like we may need to literally like move our way through it and have some sort of physical practice. I know that when I was going through a rough time, salsa dancing for some odd reason just helped me sort of process the emotions through my body. Writing was also a really transformative, helpful way to sort of give voice to all the different characters and things that were going on. spending time in nature, making sure that you drink enough water and you eat, um, letting yourself cry, reaching out to somebody who in your life has insight, or someone who can just, that they can be with you and not, share their story or advice or suggestions, someone who can just listen and be compassionate with what's going on with you. Obviously, there's many different ways that we sort of move through falling apart. And it's not always as easy to just sort of let ourselves feel everything. We sometimes have to be flexible and try a lot of different methods. But as a sort of overall concept, to really just allow ourselves in the first place to feel and fall apart and know that it's okay, and have a container within ourselves that allows all of those parts. The second way that we can practice jumping off the cliff and catching ourselves is by allowing ourselves to fall apart with each other, and not necessarily needing something from another person, but allowing them to witness it, allowing them to see exactly where we're at instead of being, fine all the time. Being fine all the time can create hardness and bitterness, or just sort of a lack of alignment. And it's as simple as, inviting someone to sort of like be with you in that transformative process. Because we like to portray our lives in this society as, perfect and pulled together and peachy and control. Everything is fine. There's nothing that's messy. And sharing strong emotions with each other stirs us, it stirs our hearts. It wakes us up. It enlivens us. It allows us to feel things that we might not otherwise allow ourselves to feel. I know, just as a personal example, earlier this year I was experiencing some kind of heartbreak, and I remember someone saying that to me, that saying of like, when your heart breaks, let more light, it allows more light to come in. And I remember going to see a friend who I hadn't seen in a long time, and I gave her a hug, and she could sense and she could feel how raw I was in that moment. And I noticed that gave her permission to be more open with what was going on in her life. And so I could see like really how interestingly it could strengthen relationships and our connections with other people by allowing ourselves to just be really raw and feeling and vulnerable, and letting someone know truthfully, this is how I feel, without needing anything from you. Like, I don't need anything. I'm just really comfortable with the fact that this is where I'm at and this is how I feel. Even sometimes I think when we're with other people, might be easier to express emotion when we're alone, but when we're with other people, we tend to stop ourselves from crying or expressing strong emotions. And for some people, it can be a really purging experience. I remember one of our team members, during one of our Flower Lounge tours on the East Coast, it was just during the road trip, something suddenly came up, and it was like this purging emotion, and she didn't even know why it was coming up. She didn't even know why she was having this intensity of an emotion, but she just allowed it to be there, and she let herself cry, and she let other people see her cry, and it was just all okay. And we all sort of held her in the space, didn't say anything, and just let that sort of move through. So I think that there's something to be said from, and it's not like reaching out to find a solution, or to figure it out, or to ask why, or to ask for advice, or to have someone analyze it, or then they share their story. It's none of that. In fact, the less words, the better. It's more about a shared experience of, allowing our hearts to open. And it just inspires a lot of compassion from both sides. And, just this sort of sense that like, we're all human beings. We feel things. We have crazy experiences. We have, really incredibly challenging things to deal with. I met so many interesting people through the Flower Lounge tour, people who have been taking care of their mothers or fathers for years, or who just have had really intense experiences. And so I know it's happening. Like I see it. I see it's happening everywhere, that people are having challenging experiences. And what would life be without that, right? But there's a way that we can work with them to let them transform us versus become harder. And that the way to sort of, I think, allow ourselves to open up a little bit more to other people in these situations is to soften and soften with ourselves, to be really soft and really gentle with ourselves. And that allows us to open up to other people. It gives us a little bit more spaciousness. It makes us more malleable, less brittle and hard, and a tendency to become bitter. So the, sort of like if the jumping off the cliff in this situation is allowing yourself to sort of fall apart in the presence of another person, the catching yourself is the softening with yourself, being really, really gentle and tender with yourself, because it's in that softening that you'll be able to just stay in the feeling experience and allow the other person to witness it, and have compassion for yourself, and that the person that you're with will also break open into compassion and softness. The third way of jumping off the cliff, this is the last one. All this jumping off the cliff is like kind of nervy. It's kind of nervous to talk about it, right? The third way to jump off the cliff is by being truthful with ourselves. And that ties back to allowing ourselves to fall apart, but it takes it even deeper in the sense that beyond having just sort of like an emotional response, it allows us to look at what's happening, to mirror back, to see the reflection in our lives about what's transforming within ourselves, or what needs to transform, what wants to transform, what's moving in a direction of transformation. And really the only way to grow is by being truthful with ourselves. And so if step one were to just let ourselves fall apart, and step two were to be truthful with ourselves, one of the ways to allowing ourselves to be more and more truthful with ourselves is to cultivate a sense of curiosity. So if the jumping off the cliff is being truthful with ourselves, because it's scary. I think it's easier sometimes to live in denial or fantasy, or sometimes the truth isn't always easy. And so one way to sort of catch ourselves, if that feels like falling, is to cultivate curiosity. I think especially culturally, we have a habit of being really hard on ourselves and blaming ourselves and judging. And we have a very, very strong habit of wanting to figure things out. We want to think our way through things. We want to find the answers. We want to understand it. We want to solidify it and, put it into like nice bullets and come to some sort of conclusion. And the reality of a lot of the challenging experiences that we go through is just that they're so complex and not cut and dry. And that especially if we're having challenging experiences with other human beings, like you think of yourself as one human being, and all of the things you experience in your life is so incredibly complex. And then you introduce another human being into the mix or a third human being into the mix. There's a lot of complexity going on. And so trying to intellectualize and figure it out, and or being hard on ourselves can just send us in circles. And so I think just being curious and being open, and not having to come to any kind of conclusion, not having to figure anything out, not having to blame or be hard on yourself, really just maintaining that sense of openness and curiosity to what is, without any conclusions or summaries or judgments. It's just I am in a state of openness and curiosity. And that's it. I'm open and curious to what is right now. And that's it. So I'd love to do a little exercise with you right now. And if you have a piece of paper and a pen handy, that would be great. We are going to be sending out the recording of this call. So if you happen to be driving or something and you want to come back to this, we'll be sending out the recording. This is really simple. So having your pen, marker, and paper close by, and then just set it down. First, we're just going to sit comfortably and close our eyes. And then just bringing something into your system that is either weighing on your heart or challenging you. It can be something minor, it can be something major, something that's weighing on your heart a little bit. And then you can open your eyes, and then taking the pen and paper, just letting yourself sort of free write whatever comes to your mind. And it will be particularly about this situation that might be challenging to you or stressful or weighing on your heart. And I'm going to ask a series of questions, and you can choose any one or some of them that resonate the most with you. And it would be, what's real about this situation? What's true in this moment? Where am I at right now? And you can let any of those parts or pieces or characters that are inside of you, especially I like for you to be open to contradictions. Like, for example, you might say, I'm really thinking about going back to school because there's a part of my job that I don't like, but then there's a part that I really like. So it's, in this exercise, it's okay if you have completely contradictory statements. So just free writing. What's real? What's real about this situation or what's happening? What's true in this moment? Where am I at right now? I'll just give you a minute or so to just a free write, and really just whatever comes into your mind, let that roll out of your pen without judging or worrying. This isn't for anyone else. I'm not going to ask you to share this. This is just for you. Again, what's true in this moment? What's real? And where am I at right now? And you can even ask yourself, what else? What else is true about this situation? Or what is interesting? What's real? Okay, and then when you're ready, putting down the pen and just sitting comfortably, closing your eyes. and just sort of like setting your physical body and setting your mind and your heart in a state of, if you were to sort of intend to open up your state of mind into a state of curiosity and softness, tenderness, and openness. And then gently opening your eyes. And this will be the second and last set of questions. There's 2 questions. And the first one is, and you can answer one or both, how is this experience allowing me to be more of myself? Or who am I becoming through this experience? How is this experience allowing me to be more myself? And who am I becoming through this experience? So I'll just repeat the questions again. How is this experience allowing me to be more myself? And who am I becoming through this experience? So this is a practice that you can always come back to if you're having a difficult situation. If you have something currently popping up now, this is something that you could do every day for the next 3 days, and see how what you write evolves and changes over time. Time is a great healer. And because I think in the end, it all comes back to the fact that we are incredibly powerful beings and that we influence and impact people just by our mere existence. And so the more effort or attention we can put into being all of ourselves, and that includes all of the beauty and the strength and the wondrous parts of ourselves, as well as the parts that we tend to hide or not want to see or repress. Instead of repressing those emotions and letting it, having the chance that it will leak out in less healthy ways, really allowing ourselves to just be in it and feel it, and give other people the chance to experience that as well. Because the freedom to be yourself is contagious, and people feel that. And they feel when you are open and vulnerable and honest and real and broken open, and it gives us all the freedom to do the same thing, to be where we're at with ourselves and with others, and to tell the truth. And we talked about the sort of 3 ways to catch ourselves after jumping off the cliff, and that was by softening into our experiences, allowing all of the parts of ourselves to be and be loved, and inviting them to the dinner table, and developing a curiosity for our experiences and who we're becoming, and being open to the fact that there's something we're learning from this particular challenge that is growing us and evolving us. So this completes what I wanted to share with you about jumping off the cliff and catching yourself. I hope that it was valuable for you. I hope that it resonates with you, and that there's something in what we talked about that you can take to heart and practice when rubber hits the road in life. I'm going to stay on the phone for a few more minutes if you want to learn more specifically about how flower elixirs can support you in these specific methods that we talked about. Feel free to stay on the call, because I wanted to share about some brand new flower elixirs from our travels in Iceland and in Sedona, Arizona, that we're sharing in our Flowerevolution program that directly address everything we've talked about this evening, and that can help support us with these methods. So I'm just going to really quickly burn through these 6 flowers because I think they're amazing. The first one is wild delphinium, and we're featuring that flower this month, and it's all about being your most wild and crazy self, including the qualities that are sometimes challenging for us, like fierce or magnetic or setting boundaries or having a sense of freedom. And then we're moving into clockvine, which is all about vulnerability and seeing and accessing and sharing the deepest parts of ourselves, like revealing our whole self. After that, we'll be working with the Icelandic Visia, which helps us let down our guard a little bit and allow us to experience more of our own magic. After that, we'll be working with this incredible flower called Self-Heal. We found on the side of a mountainside at the base of this incredible hot spring, which is all about our will to thrive, really allowing ourselves to thrive, nourishing ourselves and giving ourselves the conditions to thrive. And then the 5th flower that we'll be working with is called Icelandic moss. This is an incredible fluorescent green moss that we found in the middle of nowhere, essentially in the central part of Iceland. And this moss is all about wonder and curiosity and play and discovery and finding a sense of wild freedom within yourself. And then at the very end, we'll be working with this neon chartreuse, crazy looking flower called Lady's Mantle that will help us push beyond our own boundaries of what we think is possible and really wake up our childlike essence and help us develop a fresh perspective around whatever is going on. So if you are interested in supporting some of these methods with flower elixirs, you may want to check out our Flowerevolution program. People are just, myself included, it's pretty crazy how every month it seems like the flower is just right on, that it's exactly what we need. It just touches on something that's happening in your life in a really serendipitous way. And what people are telling us is that this program is super duper transformative and has helped them catalyze or make changes in their lives that they were either working on for years or just hadn't quite thought they were able to do it. And it also, of course, provides sort of a group or framework with other people who are all making an effort to transform the world from the inside out. So if you're interested in more nuts and bolts about that particular program, you can visit lotuswei.com/movement. It's a program in which we send out monthly flower elixirs, meditations that go with each flower that you can practice each day, recordings to inspire flower-specific insights, reflection practices, love notes. We send out flower guides if you're interested in the more educational components with videos. We offer a discount on anything from our website at 15% off for anyone who's in the Flowerevolution program. And there's a private Facebook group to support growth and help us all connect with like-minded luminaries. So if you're interested, again, you would visit lotuswei.com/movement, like we're growing a movement. Or you can also, if you have specific questions about Flowerevolution or about any of the content that we covered this evening, you can email us at flowerevolution@lotuswei.com. Again, it's flower and then evolution, even though I like to say it like revolution. It's Flowerevolution, flowerevolution@lotuswei.com. So I want to thank you all so much for being on the call tonight. And for those of you who are joining us at the recording, thank you so much for taking the time. This isn't necessarily an easy topic, but I think it's one that's really invigorating, and I cherish you seeing it of value and importance. And so thank you so much for spending this time with me. Have a wonderful evening, and sending you lots of love and flower power.